Invisible illness is either happening to you or around you. If it's happening to you, I hope that this episode can inspire acceptance and new ideas to help. If it's not happening to you, I hope that this episode will help you to better recognize and support those you know and work with. Welcome everyone to Doodle-to-Doing. I'm your host, Karen Light, Doodle Empress, aka Artist and Creative Coach at How Doodle, where I support people in becoming innovative leaders in their life and work. When you have an invisible illness, your work life and life in general is anything but normal. Periodically, your health may make it challenging to do tasks you are used to doing and that others expect of you. It may also make it difficult to keep to a typical schedule. Others may perceive you as unreliable or not invested. You may not know how to explain your illness, nor do you want to. Meanwhile, you want nothing more than to fulfill your commitments and feel up for all the tasks. My guest, Simone Giangiordano of BalanceUP Lifestyle and Business Coaching, knows this pain. She has multiple invisible illnesses alongside significant injuries and has transformed her challenges into her meaningful path in the world, helping others in similar situations find more joy and satisfaction in their life and work. So welcome, Simone. So glad you're here.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah. And we got a doodler, Nilly, here with us, and we're going to be joined a little bit later with somebody else. So thank you for being here, Nilly. Per the usual, we're going to get started with some intention setting. All right, friends, you know the drill. So let's look at Spirit of a Doodle and get into the right mindset for our time together. What phrase is jumping out to you?
Don't tolerate boredom.
Enjoy the process.
I'm going to go with, I think be silly. I'm going to go with be silly, which is an interesting thing on this topic. So I don't know why that one jumped out, but let's see what happens. I know Simone's up for it. Yeah, so go ahead and write that down for yourself at the top of your paper as an intention that you can take with you during our doodle journey today. And let's get warmed up. So in the middle of your paper somewhere, I'm going to invite you to start with a very simple little shape of a circle. Just draw a circle somewhere in the middle. Just hold it up when you're ready. Yeah. Yes. Okay. And then I want you to add to this. So a significant symbol to Simone is a sunflower. Simone, do you want to give a few words about why that's significant to you?
Yes, I love sunflowers. To me, they just represent warmth, compassion, love, healing, and always facing the sun through our struggles and helping others do the same. And my father used to sing, what's the song? You Are My Sunshine to me as a little girl.
So we're going to be inspired by her love of sunflowers. And I just want you to add to this circle, thinking of a sunflower. What starts coming up for you as you think about a sunflower? How would you doodle that out? And as you are doodling on your sunflower, think about what brings you here today. What are you curious about? And maybe you could write something that you're curious about towards the top, maybe around where your intention is. So here's my little sunflower so far. I don't know why it's purple, but that's what's happening. We're not judging why it's purple, but it is. We can go into all that symbolism later. Zooming in from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the Midwest of the United States. And the curiosity that I have is, I want to be somebody who can recognize it a little easier, I think it's hard if you're already struggling with those things, to constantly have to like say it over and over and over again or whatever. So I want to be somebody who can recognize and support the people in my life, who I know, or if I don't know, I can better recognize and figure out a way to support that. So that's my curiosity.
First, it took me a while to realize why I chose don't tolerate boredom. I have endometriosis that was not diagnosed for 37 years. So it's much, much better now, but I had terrible, terrible years. And so when I saw the invisible, like I saw the title of this workshop, like I want to be here. So, but I think that for me, it was like, I couldn't work for 2 weeks each month. And then I was recuperating. And then another 2 weeks, I was like falling apart. And doing is where I draw most of my excitement and meaning, I feel my life is meaningful and I'm a contributing member for society. So it was just, I couldn't even lie in bed, but there was a lot of boredom in this, not doing anything, right? And having to stop my entire life. So, yeah, and the interesting thing is that I found that I said about trauma of money, and I realized that both of my mentors have endometriosis, and both of them teach about trauma of money. And I'm like, it's very interesting how the bleeding and the flow is also related to this disease that blood is stagnant. Instead, here the bell rang. Here's Vanessa. So just on time. So I know what it feels like, and I think it taught me to be self-compassionate and to be very compassionate towards other people that you can't see anything. And it's also about trauma. You can't see, it's not like somebody broke their arm or something like that. You don't see it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I think you just bring up an interesting point that I know Simone's going to go into, right? Is that oftentimes we don't even recognize the things in ourselves because we think we should just be able to do this stuff, or we don't want to complain, or we don't want to put other people out. And that acceptance is so hard to sometimes come to and then embrace.
First, I love all this color in our backgrounds between the pink wall, the orange put there, and yeah. So I'm Simone, and I'm in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. We actually moved here in 2016 to better support my lung function. So this is my drawing, and what the curiosity, Karen, when you said that came to mind was how to continue to grow and serve creatively. And I guess, I talk a lot about it just hit me now. I think of sometimes our environment being our container in which we function, and that environment has so many different meanings, but, the more nutrient, the more we can create the environment that supports us, the more we can grow and bloom ourselves. So I guess that's what comes to mind in hindsight after putting my curiosity.
Well, I think that's a very important topic for today, the illness that's hidden, because I know that I make a lot of excuses sometimes. Instead of saying I just need to rest, I just say I'm working, or I'm doing something, or I'm and I think I don't know if I can say I have an illness. I mean, I'm working on my issues, but I do feel that I've been hiding a lot of my true self. Because of that, I would say physical impediments. So that's why I thought it was so important for me to be here today, to come to terms with this guilt, of not just saying, some afternoons I just lay in bed and I can't do anything else. And I haven't actually said this before until here today. And it just feels good to actually be able to express it, to express who I am at this moment, without feeling guilty or feeling like I have to justify myself. So thank you for doing this. Simone, I really, really appreciate it. I think I'm going to learn a lot from you today.
Beautifully said what you just shared.
Really, really, I mean, I feel like it's going to touch everybody on some level, what you just shared, what you shared as well, Nilly and
Yes.
Simone, like all of us have things going on that, yeah, we can feel guilty about, or like you said, like we just get embarrassed about, like, I don't want to tell people that this is actually how I'm spending my day, with all these messages, sort of toxic productivity. But even
Yes.
if we feel like we can't do the normal, I don't even know what normal productivity is anymore. I think we're so far skewed, honestly. That's a weird phrase to even say, sadly. Well, let's dive deeper and let's get started. I want to introduce Simone to you a little bit more. So Simone, better known as Simone G, right, is a life. I like your Simone G, by the way. I just think it's fun to say. Giangiordano is so beautiful as well, you know, which I just said it way better than I did before. But
You did beautiful both times.
but I love it when you know, when I'm actually thinking about it, I'm like Giangiordano, it just rolls off. But Simone G is totally fun too. It's a totally hip way to say it. So anyway, sidebar. Is a lifestyle and business coach. Simone brings hope to those with invisible health challenges, impacting the quality of their life and their business success. She gives voice to the idea that societal and cultural norms are far more limiting than any limitation that we have. Oh, that piece just gives me shivers. And that by sharing compassion, we can overcome many of the misconceptions and much of the stigma around chronic health challenges. Simone's transition from her corporate career of nearly 2 decades to entrepreneurship was the direct result of her health challenges. As she figured out how to manage a business alongside several illnesses and injuries, she shut down her first business 3 times in the first 5 years of her entrepreneurial career. It was during these years that saying "I can" nearly broke her. Thankfully, the last shutdown was back in 2012, and today she's going to share how to live and work well alongside invisible illness. All right, welcome, Simone. I'm going to spotlight you. So let's get started by just defining invisible illness and what some of those stigmas might be around it.
Wonderful. So invisible illness, even as I'm hearing within our conversations here, we tend to make it a trick question and invisible illness is literally any health challenge that can't be seen. So I think it's really important to step back and define it like that because denial is so strong. And I believe it has to do with so many of the societal and cultural norms and expectations and so forth. So the types of invisible illness, I mean, gosh, there's hundreds, even thousands. You take autoimmune alone and you can have a count from 80 to 100 depending on source and so forth. And then you have things like epilepsy, heart disease, diabetes. It just goes on and on with so many different neurological kind of conditions, endometriosis, that's a hard one to pronounce, different types of arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. And even, invisible illness can, by some definitions, include mental health challenges. Now, I tend to work primarily with individuals who have the physical invisible health challenges. However, a lot of times there is duality because of so much stigma and shame, creating so much self-doubt over the years. So a couple important statistics is, according to the CDC, 6 out of 10 of us have one or more chronic health challenges. And according to a recent article by Mark Hyman, 93.5% of us do not live with optimal metabolic well-being, which means only 6.5% of us do. And I think some of the denial comes almost from, it's starting to break down, but this almost expectation of if you don't have perfect health or really good health, you're doing something wrong, you're weak. There's something, or it's in your head, and all these things can make so many of us want to hide those. And I'm going to go a little off track from my plan because I wrote in 2017, I started caregiving for my father, and I pulled my one business back in half to do that. And in order to show up every day for him, even though my husband was more my arms and hands, but in order for me to even show up, I could not continue to try to hide my health challenges that all my life I tried to hide from people. It was impossible. I couldn't get away with, well, I'm just tired today, or my neck's just stiff, because at the time I could hardly move my head and I could hardly use my arms. And so I couldn't hide anymore. So the lesson I got from that was that all that matters is the impact we have and the love we share. And I wanted to bring that in because some of the conversation we just had about hiding. So the song I co-wrote with Christina Wilds of America's Got Talent, actually the lyrics are partly about removing our mask, letting our struggles be seen so that we can live authentic to who we are, so we can contribute our gifts. So that's really the important thing here, is if we are living in denial, then we can't come from a place of making the best decisions for ourselves. And if we aren't making the best decisions for ourselves, we can't ultimately be sharing our gifts to the extent we can. But that denial runs deep, can run deep, and it can run strong, and it's understandable. So ultimately, another thing about the denial I want to touch base on is, I'm going to share a silly story.
I like silly stories. Mine's be silly. Yay.
So I had pain starting around, early years. So starting in college, I would look at a stairwell and say, it's not going to hurt this time to go up. In the meantime, I had atrophy in my leg. I drug it. I limped really bad. I couldn't keep up with peers walking or anything, but I'd look at those steps like, it's not going to hurt this time. And I would literally almost pull myself up, sometimes crawl. And when I'd get to the top, I got there, I'd be in excruciating physical pain, but I'd also be sad. I'd be frustrated. I feel like I failed. So finally, one day I looked at that stairwell and I said, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt bad, and it's okay. And it did. Excruciating pain. That didn't change, but I got to the top and I felt empowered. And that's the difference of letting go of denial of where we truly are at. And I call, because of that story, I call myself the queen of denial. But when you let go of that, we now take a place of empowerment to make better decisions. It's that self-acceptance. And it doesn't mean that we have to stay there. We might not. We might be able to create a more healing environment for ourselves. We might find new solutions. So letting go of that in denial. And I know it's hard to do, and it's a journey itself, but the more we can let go of that denial and be true to ourselves, the more we can do to share our gifts. Yeah. And I believe there's a lot of dignity in being able to share our gifts with others.
Yeah. So much about what you said is such an important message, this hiding piece and this accepting and moving through denial, how challenging that is. Something that really struck me that you said was just how many people are fighting this and hiding this and then thinking it's their fault that these things are even occurring. And it reminds me, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and this man was talking about food and people's shame around food if they're overweight. And part of the issue with hiding is that people or companies or entire sort of organizations aren't held responsible for their part in this whole thing as well. I don't know how many people might be experiencing physical, discomfort or unwellness due to other circumstances outside of them that have nothing to do with what they did for themselves, and if they hide it, then we never get to move the needle on other big forces around us, like changing. So yeah, it's empowering for you, and also just so important for all of us, our collective healing. What you're saying, it just really stands out to me. So let's doodle for a second with this. No matter what you're going through, everybody probably has a story of a stigma that you have been working through, up against in your life. And as you think about that stigma, just somewhere near or around or next to your sunflower, we're going to stay on the same page again this time with this doodle shop. somewhere on that same page, doodle out what that stigma looks like to you. What does it feel like? What does it look like if you were to doodle a stigma that you've been up against? Let's do that for 1 minute. Simone, I know you've been sharing some of your story with us, but I want to give you a chance to dive a little bit deeper into that. It's such a transformational, inspiring story that you've been through. And I would love to have our audience hear more of where you're coming from. So can you share more of that story with us?
Absolutely. I had lung issues as an infant. And that I think over the years impacted a lot of my health and well-being, even through medical intervention. Eventually, one thing keeps you alive, another can actually, over the years, all the medications and so forth, have a big impact on your systems as well. So I was in the corporate world for many years, almost 2 decades, and eventually I was working on this big, first web-based platform for a big bank. And I got to the point where I was just trying one day to get to a coffee shop to stay awake for the rest of the day. I was struggling. And I managed to get down to the street, and the coffee block was only 1 block away. And I just could hardly take a single step. I had been struggling to walk and so forth. And I had been in an accident prior. And, traffic zooming by, pedestrian skirting, and it was all I could do literally to not collapse on the street. And I was really quite confused at that point as well. And a couple coworkers happened upon me, wanted to call an ambulance. I was like, no, please, just get me back and call my husband. And my husband came and picked me up. He took one look and was like, why don't you just leave? This place is killing you. So actually, it wasn't just the place, but a factor. and I ended up resigning the next day, giving 5 weeks notice. So I took most of 2008 to really work on my well-being, to change a lot of lifestyle. Even though I'd always been health focused, I just couldn't get things right. So I started a business then, like, what can I do if I can only work 2 hours a day? What can I do? I wasn't going for my dream job. I was doing, what can I do? Again, the dignity of work. So I started a business that really was an early virtual assistant, and that morphed into, over time, a marketing business. So anyhow, one of my challenges was success. Growing too quickly. That would get me in trouble. And that's why I ended up having a couple shutdowns. After 2 shutdowns, I thought I had this down. I'm doing good with my business, but I wanted to make a smart strategic move to be able to up the level of clientele I was working with per se, so that I could earn more per hour to manage my well-being. So I go and I have this hour-long consultation with this sales trainer, who very expensive program. And at the end, and I'm thinking, that went okay. And at the end, he looks at a poster on the wall that has a triangle: mind, body, spirit. And he said, look, your mind and your spirit are great, but until you learn how to take care of your body, your health, you are never going to achieve the success you desire. So he would not take like $10,000 from me. And he did like such a huge ethical favor that I think so few would do. So I consider that a really big gift in my entrepreneurial career. So I decided that evening, talked with my husband again, and shut down for 6 months was the plan. And I transitioned all my clients to a peer, so they were well cared for. But it ended up being an entire year. But in that year is when I really started, and it's a journey, but to really do things differently. I literally fired all but one of my doctors, rebuilt my own, what I call dream team, that it was included more integrative kind of approach, and just really started to evaluate things from a whole, perhaps internal perspective. What's aligned with me? What do I need to do differently each day? Looking at each day as a gift, and so forth. So that really began to be my transition. At the end of that year, I rebranded my business into a marketing business, opened a small shop 5 miles from downtown Pittsburgh, where I offered hands-on training in social media and email marketing. It was a lot simpler back then. And I also walked a half a marathon. So that was, that was my coming back after a year, what I call the power of the pause. But it was a pause in which I worked on myself. So that was very, very valuable. So I think the key thing there that I learned, that's when I really began to learn how saying I can do this, and beginning to put the impact of societal and cultural norms. And this, I can do this if I just push harder, mind over body, that kind of concept that I'm strong, and almost like needing to prove that I was strong while at the same time hiding so much challenge. That's where the conflict, that's where caused the conflict, the ultimate crack in the foundation of my well-being, perhaps. So that's when I started to really focus more on the power of I can't, which is again based on a self-awareness and acceptance. This is what's really happening, for letting go of other norms and stuff. And what do I need personally? What's going to help me succeed ultimately, not for my own benefit, obviously, but again, so I can share my gifts, so we can contribute. So those were important parts of my journey there. And that last shutdown was 2012.
Yeah, that's a long, I mean, so you're like, 11 years
Yeah.
Without a shutdown. So it sounds like you really learned some things.
Yeah. And there have been some, I don't want to, not necessarily close calls, but times that definitely in the past would have led to that same level of shutdown. But I had built the right, stronger foundations, systems. I built a cycle in for growth, literally like a season for seasonal approach of development, a growth stage, stabilize, and rejuvenate. And that's kind of like my annual calendar myself, just like, the sunflowers, they have their annual calendar, their seasons of growth and so forth. So I've taken myself through that to create stronger foundation for myself as well.
Beautiful. So many good juicy bits in there. And that story of transformation, we're all on our journeys here, working to overcome these stigmas that not only are the outside anymore, but that we internalized, right? Which keeps us in the hiding and the embarrassment or the shame or the guilt, as Vanessa said. So as you think about your own story with this stigma that you just doodled, what have been some of those, moments of transformation, some of those lessons that jump out to you? And as you think about those lessons, I want you to doodle that into your picture, maybe below your sunflower a little bit. Maybe they're the seeds for this sunflower. She was just talking about, building that foundation. So you could look at it as seeds or foundation. As you think about those lessons you've learned, go ahead and doodle for a minute. It's understandable, with these stigmas that we're talking about, that many people, and I'm sure we've all felt this at different points, that it's just too much, and that maybe we're up against too much to have what we really want, which is some kind of happy, work and life. So I heard you talk about this self-compassion a lot, and this, stepping into your power. What gives you sort of, and what can help other people to see it with that sort of mindset? What do you think contributes to you being able to step more into that and help other people step into that?
Okay, so going back to my personal story there, what I learned that year, I think a huge lesson was that self-acceptance was the only path forward. And it really was really a number of years before I started putting any words to any contemplative kind of practice, such as self-compassion. But that's really what I was doing. So self-compassion, looking from the lens, the perspective that we all have suffering in life. It's part of what the human condition is, what makes us human, and so forth. And just as every one of us has suffering, we all want to be happy. We all want to live that life with less suffering. And that's really the basis of compassion.
Yeah.
And when you
So
start,
Vanessa has
go
a
ahead.
quick question. Do you mind?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
Please.
go ahead and finish it. I can ask after.
Okay.
Are you sure?
Okay. I just didn't want her to get too far ahead and then you not be able to ask your question.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah,
So-
just jump in when you're ready, Vanessa.
Okay. And so ultimately, when we look through that lens, and it does a couple things. I'm going to back up real quickly and sort of go, what is it? Again, back up to the stigma. What is the impact of societal and cultural norms? Because this comes into our play to the denial, to not accepting where we are at this point in time and holding us back. And that comes back to societal and cultural norms, which ultimately has so much impact, or can have so much impact, on what we consider to be success, whether it's lifestyle, whether it's money, etc. Quick fixes, and marketers know this stuff. They know how to get to the way to make you feel like this is what you need to make your life successful. This is what you need to be whole, etc. So actually, so maybe my marketing work has helped me make some of these realizations. So, and why do societal and cultural norms have such an impact? Because going back to that human condition, we want to belong. We want to fit in. And so it's easy to be drawn into comparing ourselves. Well, I should be able to work this much, or I need to run a business that does this way, or I should be able to show up for that person. Well, maybe we just don't have it in us right there at that time, because we need to take care of ourselves. So kind of, I think, understanding that is important. And then looking at it from the perspective, going back to the concept of compassion, is that when we look at life through that perspective, and we can see how we would give others kindness, that we give that to ourselves. And again, it's part of letting go of what were considered norms, maybe letting go of how we used to do things, because trying to do that is just creating what I call the cycle of setbacks. Work for a day, a couple days, a couple weeks, and then have a day or whatever, we're struggling, and it just goes like this. And to stop that cycle is that acceptance, that self-compassion, that, hey, I'm hurting too. I need to take time. I need to lean into these challenges. I need to accept these challenges. And then looking through a new lens. And again, the power of I can't is ultimately about so that you can't do it this way, can't do that. For years, I couldn't sit down at a desk for 5 minutes, or I couldn't work for a couple of days. So I'm saying I can't do that. What can I do now? It's to better serve my clients. It's to better serve myself. So having that self-compassion, and then again, that lets go of that second layer of suffering I talked about with the silly stare story of the emotional pain and suffering around the actual illness, to be able to have the self-compassion and acceptance, then that begins to dissipate. And the other really important thing that self-compassion, for some people, it's easier to sort of practice self-compassion. For others, it might be easier to practice, look at compassion on other people. But regardless, it's all part of a natural skill set that we can build. And when you look at the people who have hurt you, or hurt somebody, and you begin to see that they have suffering too. An example is, some doctors. I mean, majority of us who have some kind of invisible illness have felt stigmatized by one or more doctors. When you begin to look at, this is what they're trained to do, this is what they're training they don't receive. When you begin to look at, this is the systems, hey, insurance companies are giving them 15 minutes to spend with me, and then you can begin to give that doctor compassion, or whether if you're still working with that doctor, it can help your communications with that doctor. So you're helping both of you. If you're not, you can, and maybe help to forgive a hurt or something. For example, I had a doctor when I fell, I could not lift my arms. I could not shower myself. My husband had to dress me, and this is 4 days after our honeymoon. Hello, honey. He wouldn't send me for testing. He would not send me for testing. So 4 years later, my husband went into his boss crying, saying, I don't know what to do. She is in such horrible, horrible pain. I just don't know how to help her. And his boss's daughter worked at Johns Hopkins and got her on the phone. So these are the kind of things, like, in afterwards being able to give compassion to that doctor. It helps us too. So
come back into the conversation. Vanessa, before I riff off of her a little bit, is there something you wanted to ask there?
Yes, it has to do, I think, probably with compassion. And it's, how do you, in your experience, how do you go from shame and embarrassment and hiding your illness to the opposite, like total disclosure? And I'm not sure about how much you can say to somebody or how much you cannot say. It's like, give too much information or not give enough information about your health and your state of being and your productivity. I don't know if my question makes sense.
yeah, oh, absolutely. It makes sense. And it's not an easy answer. That's my answer there. However, there's a lot of factors that come into play. I don't recommend going and sharing everything. I mean, I share quite a bit, but I still don't share everything. So what comes into play is your relationship with that individual. Your comfort level with where you are in your journey is actually, I would say, number one. You don't need to feel, I would not recommend to advise, sharing before you're ready, or not, that doesn't, or if, we don't have to share everything to be authentic. On the other hand, if it's a relationship you're comfortable with and it could help you collaborate together better, and you think that person's understanding and confidential, if that's important to you, then you maybe could have a little conversation, but it's really a very personal decision. You can journal around it. I live by the beach. That's my favorite pondering time. So nature, there's however you relate to yourself the best would be one of the avenues. And then, if you're not ready, what are some things? I'm going to kind of just brainstorm a little bit here. Like you did, you just asked for a phone call in the morning. You could just say, I'm not going to recommend lying, but you also don't have to give too much information. So, hey, mornings is when I'm at my peak performance, and maybe not those words, but mornings is when I can really be available and have a really great conversation. My afternoons, a lot of times you'd say I'm busy. You're busy taking care of you. You know what I mean? So there's some different options around there, but certainly I don't, I think the first level is not hiding to ourselves. And then a comfort level from there. And sometimes that comfort level may come with people who are closest to us or people who aren't closest to us. It's a very personal thing again, to give consideration to meditate around, journal around, and so forth. Does that help? Did that answer?
It does. Yeah, I think it's just turning into the positive. The morning is when I can do this and that, and without giving too much disclosure about afternoons. I really like that.
Yeah. For example, I worked primarily with almost entirely with California clients initially, because their day started at 11 o'clock my time, and I needed hours to work on my pain management to be able to show up, but they didn't need to know that.
I appreciate this thoughtfulness approach, like you can be wherever you're at, and as long as you're in touch with that, then you can respond accordingly. And I think part of what gets woven in here maybe is a lot of us have this for whatever reason, that's a whole separate podcast, but this need to be available all the time to people, where that could come from a fear of scarcity, or that they'll go away, or this need to please. And, I think maybe that would be something to look at in the situation is like, why do I have a problem not being available whenever they need me? Because the truth is that like, not for any reasons except for to take care of my own creativity. I don't make appointments on Fridays. I don't even need to say that to everybody, but like, it's important that I just say, can't do it on Friday. Somebody says it, nope, can't do it on Friday. And that's all I have to say, like can't do it. And if somebody tells me that, I'm like, cool, can't do it on Friday. I don't think, well, I wonder why they're not available for me. Like, but it's hard for us. We want to, and I think that comes with, the wanting to hide something and just overcome it. Because
I think it does play
easier
in
for everybody else. And meanwhile, we're making it harder on ourselves.
Yeah, great points. It's easy to fall into because maybe we feel we're struggling so much. We don't want somebody else. It's that don't want to, I'm talking for me personally, anyhow, in the past, I don't want to be seen as weak. I'm capable of doing this, and I know that I'm going to be in bed probably for a while, but so almost overdoing sometimes can be for some of us.
That overcompensation piece. Yeah.
And I have a question. How do you deal with this more time in bed? Because I realized that a lot of my thoughts are into must get up, must. Okay, you've had enough now. There's the way that I talk to myself while I'm in bed, which is it's more like a reprimand. Like you say, in denial, act like it's no big deal. Yeah, all you have to do is just get out of bed and you'll be fine, and that kind of dialogue in turn is what I'm worried about, how you manage it every day.
Yeah, by planning for it, by knowing, hey, if I do this is probably going to be my next step, and that's okay. And then that could be resting, it could be meditating, I could journal in bed, I could be in my mind thinking through strategy, depending on whether it's a cognitive impact more or a physical impact more, or could just I might just sit and have the dog on my lap watching Netflix, knowing that I'm going to then get up after this rest and be productive again. And some days if I sit down in the afternoon, I might know this is probably, I'm telling myself I'm gonna get up, but I doubt that I will. So there are, and to allow that, not to beat myself up for that if that happens, not to necessarily make that my norm, but to know if I feel the sense that my body still needs that rest, I'm going to give that to her. Is it okay if I throw out a couple tips, Karen?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's just roll into the tips,
merging in.
I feel like that's where we were headed next, and we're rolling naturally into that. And just one thing I hear you saying though is, setting those healthy expectations for yourself, and I think that comes with acceptance. Like if you truly are accepting that this is where you are, then it's easier to kind of set those. And maybe that's not, no judgment of where you are on that journey of acceptance, but maybe that's a bit of a litmus test. Like, oh, I'm finding that I'm really struggling and telling myself these sort of harsh things. Where do I need to fall into acceptance? How can I give myself a little acceptance this morning, so that I can ease a little bit more into my day? Or
I'm going to add one more thing before you answer, Simone, is also the projecting yourself into the day. On top of that is if you're in the morning and you're doing your exercise and you're eating healthy and you're got all this going on, and then suddenly you have a cloud over you that says, well, no matter how great you're doing, in the afternoon you're going to end up in bed closed up like an invalid. That's kind of another thing that I'm just throwing at you answer whenever.
I know lots of topics to unpack, and I will give you links to her because she writes amazing newsletters. She puts out great content. You will love her website. There's so much good support that she can offer. But if you want to go ahead and Simone and kind of just go into some tips that you'd like to share, keeping those things in mind.
Yeah. I want to remember the veil there too. So again, self-compassion. For a couple years, there was self-care. You couldn't look at anything without seeing self-care. And again, some of those were quick fixes and stuff, but I look at self-compassion as the ultimate self-care. It's knowing, it's being aware and honoring your needs around your physical well-being, your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being, being aligned with your beliefs and values, and your social well-being as well. So like how it impacts how we relate with people, our relationships, which we are social creatures by nature. So those are all such important aspects of us. I'm going to throw off, I'm kind of thinking back through things that have come up, and our agreements with clients or customers. Vanessa, you talked about mornings versus afternoons. One of my things that was absolutely key critical was turnaround time. I made a decision from day one. I was not going to work with real estate agents or morticians because they both needed immediate turnaround time, right?
Funny.
So that kind of concept, but then like eventually I progressed. Initially I had 24-hour turnaround in my agreements with clients. Then it was 48, then it was 72. And then it switched eventually to 1 week. And then I put in my agreements, and this is not legal advice. You can work with your lawyer on this. However, things like if a client misses a meeting or doesn't provide content on the agreed upon time, then it had to be worked back into my production calendar. In other words, I was done with last minute stuff and me being up till 3 a.m. because of missed deadlines on my client's part. So I just put it in my agreement. It's solved. And I made a thing every once a year, I would let the one client go if it made sense. So continued. And then I actually have had so many amazing clients. But in my early years, these were things that were really important to getting to that point, that are often overlooked, and they're very tangible. Listening to our bodies and being able to slow down enough. And I have a feeling that you're both are probably quite attuned. But listening from the perspective of starting to realize, hey, that sensation tends to come before whatever symptom happens. And then having a much more preventative, proactive approach to our physical well-being and emotional even. So for example, listening to your body, then I call it thriving through self-awareness and knowing what I call your red flags. These are maybe the top 2 or 3 symptoms that have the biggest impact on the quality of my life or my ability to be there for my business and my clients. And I say a top red flags because it's so easy to either be in denial, pushing through, ignoring, trying to pretend none of this happens, or hyper vigilant, paying attention to everything, versus more centered and balanced in the middle and focusing in a healthier way on what's having the biggest impact. And so these are the ones that also can have the biggest potential financial impact. It might mean, hey, if I push myself beyond this, I'm going to lose a client, or I'm not going to be able to show up for that project, or I won't be able to take one on, or I won't be able to be for some family event. Financial, emotional, or further impact your well-being by pushing too much. So an example for me, if I start to have trouble walking, my legs just don't want to do what my brain wants to do, I know it's time for critical level work only for 2 or 3 days. That's one of my red flags. And what I have found is as you start to approach the top 2 or 3 red flags, those start not necessarily to be your red flags anymore. And something that was less impacting now gets lifted, and you start to work on that. And that's really how BalanceUP came to be. So that's important. And Vanessa, this might partly is aligning your work with how you feel that day. And that is sort of taking a quick body scan. Where am I physically, emotionally, cognitively, today? And if you're able, and again, the more flexibility you can build into the business, the more you can do this. But if you're able to say, okay, you know what, cognitively today, I'm kind of struggling, or it's a high pain day, or whatever it is, what can I do that's more maybe considered like compiling, assembling, data entry, lower level tasks that still need done, but don't require as much creativity or development or strategic. And then on the other days, having that space to be more creative, more strategic. And also, if you know you want to work on a project that's going to take that kind of energy and thought, and you want to be your best, is building the pause in before. I mean, the power of the pause, I'll put it in. Maybe it's a couple hours here, maybe it's a couple days, depending on the size and scope of the project. And so it's that planning, working backwards almost in planning, has had a huge impact. And then on those days, like another thing you had mentioned about, Vanessa, in bed, what can you do? Are there tasks that don't require the same amount of brain power that can be worked? And then that's very individual. So I think the last thing I'll mention here, because I think we're probably getting close on time, is around uncertainty. These kind of challenges have so much uncertainty in our life. I can, am I going to feel good today? Or is it 1 day, 2 weeks, whatever? And to just really acknowledge that, and that it's okay. And in reality, there's not a whole lot of certainty anyhow. It just kind of gets hyped up, with these kinds of challenges. And so, for example, is it time to, like for being on a podcast, there were years that I wouldn't show up live because I had maybe only 10-20% of the time where I was able to show up decent. Now, once I get to 80%, hey, okay, let's do this. Maybe it's time for that new project. So looking at your personal stats, where you are on your journey, so that it doesn't set you back, and that how using that as information. I consider data to be good one way or the other. It helps us make decisions. As to that veil that you mentioned, Vanessa, I think what you're saying is you're feeling good, but you start to get concerned. Is that accurate?
Yes, it's almost like projecting. I'm projecting. I'm wondering if I'm projecting and I'm going to be feeling bad and I'm going to be in bed in the afternoon, and maybe I won't, but I just have this feeling that, oh, that's what's going to happen. It's like self-fulfilling prophecy type thing.
So what comes to mind is a couple things. I wear this bracelet. It says Simone lives, and it's just a simple reminder to be grateful for every day and what I can do. So I think bringing that focus to the acceptance, again, that self-compassion, letting go of the hiding, the denial, and so forth, all just opens the doors to having that veil. What I don't think is just, I'm not going to let that veil appear today. I don't, I think that might even just pull it down quicker or something, you know what I mean? So it, almost leaning into it to be able to let go of it over time.
One thing that helps me when I feel like I'm projecting to like sort of worst case scenario, and it feels like it could become the self-fulfilling prophecy, is just to think, well, maybe that will happen and maybe it won't, like I don't have to decide either way. But I can just put a maybe in there. And there's something about that curiosity for me, that levity of the situation. It's just like, well, maybe not. We'll see what happens, and I'll just see where I'm at when I get closer. And we'll just, I don't know, I'm open, I'm open. I'm just going to be open to what happens. And if it does turn out to be the worst case scenario, okay, I've been there before. I know I can handle that. And that's what I'll handle, and if it's not, then great, bonus, okay.
That's when you said about accepting and then knowing that you can handle what comes your way then.
So let's take some of these beautiful tips into a longer doodle. I'm going to invite you to get comfy in your chair and empty your hands. And let's close our eyes and go within for a few minutes. And I'm going to invite you for this to put your hands on your heart. Let's do actually an action that brings up that self-compassion feeling. And just breathe some love into that heart space for yourself and whatever stigmas, challenges you might be going through. this place of love for yourself and self-compassion. One of the things that Simone invited us to do was to see these challenges through a new lens, as a way of stepping into our own power and as a way of stepping into what we're meant to bring to the world. So as you bring that doodle to mind of your stigma, how might thinking about it in that way start to change how that looks to you? What if that stigma had a bit of an agenda to grow you and to help you find your own unique path in the world? Just imagine how your sunflower might start transforming. And as you start to see your stigma and your sunflower growing and transforming, slowly blink your eyes open and let the doodle carry you for the next 5 minutes, playing with those ideas, continuing on top of those doodles, expanding them, letting them transform, reminding yourself of your intention as you do.
So I'll be open to hearing about your feedback, and then I'll tell you what my intentions were drawing the doodle. This was the first one that I did, and then that was like the conflict you said, right? And then that we kind of moved from there.
I'll share. I see a star shining, like almost being born with invisible illness, like being visible, but being here and rising above.
I'm really drawn to the colors on the right side under, in that tree, the trunk of the tree. And I just see like how all maybe these pieces, they kind of are building this tree up. They're creating the beauty of the tree and its own uniqueness as well. They're feeding it. I'm seeing these arrows like coming up from the bottom is like, I don't know. I can't see exactly what you do down there, but the first thing that came to mind is that there are little eyes under the arrows. And so these things, these insights, these things that you've learned, these lessons you've gleaned are like helping this tree become its own wacky thing in a good way. Good, wacky is good in my world. What do you want to share about it, Vanessa?
Well, actually, I thought this was like the stigma, or actually, I like what you said about the stars coming through, because for me, these were the clouds and the sky was down here. So my world was upside down because of the stigma. Here I'm crying and I'm like, what do I do? When the world is upside down like this. I really like the idea that the stars is actually making it rise. So here was not be so much in my head, but more in my body. And then when you get out of the stigma, I started drawing these trees, and I thought it was interesting that I drew this tree and it looked like a hand. Did you see?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So it almost looks like it says, well, you're able. I mean, you have the possibility. It's your hands, it's your body. You can do this. You're like part of the tree. And this, what you saw, I didn't mean it to be eyes. For me, it was the seeds of the crying that kind of grew flowers into a tree. But then I put the seeds there, and so it looks like eyes, like you said. So I figured it'd be like, I see, because of my vision, the tree gets, more flowery and more wacky, as you say. So it's all there, even if it's dormant. If I'm lying down in my bed, what I see is enough to create something beautiful.
Yeah.
Nice.
Wonderful.
And this was ABTD was one of how to get better is by talking about it, how I'm feeling.
Nice.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Love it. All right, floor is open. Oh, you just went back on mute. There you go.
I said that I did it on 2 different pages. This was the first one. And it's kind of interesting because it brought up and stigma from a different experience, but and I think that listening to you, Simone, you kind of translated my entire journey that I didn't. So thank you for sharing your story. It was very empowering and inspiring and made sense, of what I went through. And this is what I.
Can you bring it closer so we can see what it says?
Oh, nice.
Shine on you.
Yeah, because I was made to think that I was crazy. It's your period. It's not a disease. What are you complaining about? You're nuts. You're crazy. You're making a drama. Da, 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 da. So I'm going to shine on my.
Wonderful. I love those bright yellow colors here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
I love the spiral.
It feels very empowering.
It feels very like I'm here. It's very bright and point, like reaching out, like both ways are happening. It's very dynamic in that way. That's the word I was looking for, like dynamic. I'm here, I'm going to shine on. And now I just have the Pink Floyd song in my head, which is awesome. And I love it. Yeah. Even a diamond, like even that song coming up, right? Like the diamond, how it gets refined under such pressure, is something that occurs to me as well.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you. Simone, do you want to take a minute to share?
Sure. So let's see here. So this was the stigma coming in. I used the doctor example that I shared. And it's sort of like all kinds of sharp angles coming in, hitting you in your heart, kind of. And after at the end, when Karen suggested, I forget what, but anyhow, these are like the love is what will heal that. That's what will break down the stigmas. And this was actually a barrier behind the stigma, that the stigmas come from barriers, not having an open mind, not being curious, self-protecting and so forth, and systems. So that's the love that breaks it apart. And then this, I had a little heart kind of supporting it all. This is hands, caring, supportive hands. And ultimately, this is like meant to be like the ripple, just being able to share, to contribute, to ultimately and measure like little itsy. I go by the concept that impact can be very small to have a big impact.
Yeah. And I just, I want to go back to that circle that you initially drew around that thing too, because so much of what you shared today was about boundaries, right? Like creating healthy boundaries for yourself and other people, so that you can thrive. So you can thrive and create those ripples and have that love that transforms the stigma. And like, it's like sacred, like holding yourself sacred. And I think that's so beautiful. It's such a huge part of acceptance, is being able to hold ourselves sacred no matter what's going on. So,
It looks like a boat. I'm going to add, it looks like a boat at the bottom. So it gives me this idea of a journey where you're going to have waves, sometimes you're going to be rocky, just about what you said today. Sometimes you're going to be able to, and sometimes you're not going to be able to. And it's about that. When you're on a boat, you don't really fight against the wave. You're like, oh, it's a tempest today, and get angry about it, or get angry at yourself. You adapt. If there's a storm, you have to, bring the thing down, and then you rest. So I really like that image of the boat. I think it's a wonderful analogy of your life, and
that's so. I forgot, I recently erased on my board all the storms and the clouds and the boat, and then here somebody getting on the boat, and then here having the boat under the sun with ultimately with the inner compass and joy. So that
it came back.
I didn't put it together. Thank you.
I love that too, like that whole idea of like being afraid of rocking the boat, can really fly into that too. Like, that's why we're hiding. We want to rock this boat that we think, if we rock it, we'll be like, walk the plank, get off this boat if we rock it. So it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm going to share super quick because I like something that came up in it. I was drawing, like, at first, this was like the stigma that was like blocking the sun. And then as I was doodling it, it like reached out, like there was like a hand, and it wanted to provide a place for things to grow on and around. And it wanted to help me get bigger than it. Like if there was nothing to grow up against, then it would stay small. So it was like kind of like challenge me. And in that process, everything became a lot more wacky, which is, I was resonating with Vanessa's on that piece. That was something I was seeing in mine, is like, we get to be our wacky selves. We get that authentic, fulfilling, piece back into our lives when we just sort of say, you know what, stigma, I
like how you have no qualms
myself anyway.
About drawing over. I like how you have no qualms about drawing over your text. It's like, I can't read the text, but it doesn't matter. It's like, it's in the past, the text, and then something on top, and then something on top is like, you create something, and it's like getting out of the stigma as well. You don't have something defined. It's getting bigger and bigger, and the whole picture is okay. The whole picture is what it is.
I love that you said that because I actually had qualms about going over the text. At first I was
I like
going
it.
around it and then I was like, what is wrong with it? And then I think that just demonstrates exactly what you're talking about, of just letting it, go where it wants to go. Forget about these rules that we make up, and these things that just don't serve us, So beautiful, beautiful conversation. Thanks so much for sharing your journeys, you guys. I think everybody has something that they're up against, and hearing from you and hearing your stories, makes them maybe pause and think like, oh, maybe this is something I need to pay more attention to about myself. Maybe I need to honor this a little bit better and put those boundaries in. Simone, I can't say enough. I really appreciate your work, and just the beautiful, compassionate, gentle way in which you share it is very inspiring, very uplifting, and yet not at all inauthentic. It just, your heart has undoubtedly swelled a million times from your journey, and it shows. And I just appreciate it that you show it, and all that you do. I do want to tell you guys that Simone has a beautiful offer. She has a BalanceUP lifestyle and business assessment that can help you build your own route, your own personal path to creating a life and business that supports your well-being. She shared some of how she's done that for herself, and she can do that for you as well. There's an assessment that you take, you get a lot of detailed resources back, and she also includes a 60-minute session with that. And there's a $99 special. So I will put the links in there. If you're interested, you can check it out. There's a little passcode of Doodle99 that you put in the checkout, and then you get the special rate. So all of her resources will be below. Even if you just want to connect with her on LinkedIn or Instagram or her newsletter, I recommend it. She will make you feel better about this journey that you're on, and feel like you're not alone on that journey. So thank you, everybody, and everybody who's listening. Whatever stigma you're up against, I hope that this podcast helped you feel a little bit more held in that process. And feel free to reach out to Simone, or any of us. We'll be happy to connect with you and support in any way that we can. Until next time, keep sparking that creativity.